Have you ever, looked at those global university rankings and wondered why some universities are always at the top
Yeah.
and others, some with really strong histories, they never seem to get there.
Right.
So that's what we're going to be looking into today with this deep dive
Yeah.
based on the stuff that you sent over to me.
Yeah. It's become a really important question, I think, for universities and policymakers,
Yeah.
especially since around the mid-2000s. I mean, what started as kind of a simple
Yeah.
way to compare universities
Yeah.
has become much more influential, much more powerful.
Totally. And I think, for the listener out there, it's important to realize that these rankings aren't just some kind of academic scorecard. You know what I mean? They actually affect national research agendas. They
Right.
determine where funding goes. They even, can affect decisions that universities themselves make.
Totally.
And it's really become like a high stakes environment.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's interesting, and you might have seen this in some of the articles that you sent me, is that
Right.
countries like France and Germany,
Yeah.
with their really long and rich history of,
Yeah.
academic and scientific contributions,
Right.
they haven't always been
Yeah.
at the very top, you know what I mean, of these global lists.
Well, that's right. And it's interesting if you think about the historical impact,
Totally.
of scholarship from France and Germany.
Yeah.
It's immense. So it's interesting that their relative position in the global rankings, especially around that time,
Yeah.
it really sparked a lot of discussion and debate within those countries.
Yeah.
There was a clear sense that something needed to be done
Right.
to really raise the international standing and recognition of their top universities.
Absolutely. So they didn't just, sit on their hands and say,
Yes, they didn't.
oh, well, so to understand what happened, for you out there,
Yeah.
France and Germany both actually launched these pretty big national initiatives aimed at boosting select universities.
Yeah.
In France, this was called the Initiative d'Excellence.
Right.
And then in Germany, they had the Zukunftskonzeptes.
Yep.
And these were, think of them as major,
Yeah.
investment programs.
Huge investment. Yeah.
And the goal was to basically supercharge the
Wow.
research capabilities
Yep.
and the global kind of visibility
Yeah.
of a certain group of universities. So the idea was,
Yeah.
and this probably seems logical,
Right.
that if you pump a lot of money into these places,
Yeah.
they would naturally produce better research. They would get more international recognition, and ultimately they would climb up those global rankings, right?
That's how it seemed on the surface.
Yeah.
And it is, a pretty reasonable
Yeah.
hypothesis when you first think about it.
Yeah.
The thinking was that this funding would allow these universities to attract the best researchers,
Right.
invest in the best facilities and equipment,
Yeah.
and just, produce better and more impactful research.
Yeah.
And the hope was that that would then
Yeah.
be reflected in the rankings.
Totally. So the question is,
Right.
as we go deeper into your sources,
Yeah.
did this massive
Right.
financial injection, did it really lead to the outcome they wanted? Did France and Germany
Yeah.
suddenly see their universities
Yeah.
just shoot to the top of the global ranking?
Exactly. And that's what researchers like Nicolas Carriol and Francois Maublanc, whose work you sent to me, they set out to investigate.
Yeah.
They used a statistical approach,
Okay.
something called difference in differences,
Yeah.
to try and isolate
Okay.
the impact of
Yeah.
these funding initiatives. So
Okay.
essentially they compared
Yeah.
the universities
Yeah.
that got the funding
Okay.
to similar universities that didn't,
Yeah.
to see if the changes were really because of the extra money.
Yeah. So if I'm visualizing this, it's
Well-
like, we have two sets of plants, right?
Yeah.
And we give one set
Yeah.
extra fertilizer.
Yep.
And then we look really carefully at how they grow.
Right.
And we see, did the fertilizer make a difference?
Exactly.
So what were the main takeaways from their research?
Right.
What did this examination reveal?
So at first, the findings,
Yeah.
they showed a positive effect
Okay.
in one key area.
Okay.
The universities that got the funding,
Right.
they did have an increase
Okay.
in the sheer volume
Okay.
of research publications.
So in terms of like raw output,
Yep.
it looked like the investment was having an effect.
Yeah,
More money, more research papers, right?
exactly. More resources
Yeah.
probably means more projects, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. that
Yeah.
there would be more publications.
But the real question is, and this is something to really think about. From what you sent me,
Yeah.
did that increase in output, did it mean better quality research?
Right. Do they produce more
Yeah.
of the kind of groundbreaking, really important work
Yeah.
that really pushes their fields forward.
Exactly.
So that's where things get a little more complicated.
Okay.
And, for you listening, this is really important.
Yeah.
The research that you sent me,
Yeah.
it highlights this distinction.
Okay.
While the quantity of research publications went up,
Yeah.
the study found that there wasn't a similar increase
Okay.
in what they called high-impact research.
Okay.
These are the papers that are cited all the time
Right.
that really have an impact
Yeah.
on their fields.
Right.
And so there was an increase in publications overall,
Yeah.
but not a similar increase
Okay.
in this kind of game-changing
Okay.
high-impact research.
So for you, the listener, I mean, the
Yeah.
big takeaway here is that more activity doesn't always mean better quality, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about research.
Yeah.
That's really impactful on a global scale.
You're casting a wider net,
Right.
but you're not necessarily catching more of the valuable fish.
Exactly.
So it's not all,
It's not all bad news, though.
Oh, okay. So where did it make a difference?
Yeah.
According to the stuff you sent me.
So there were some areas where the funding really had a positive impact.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones was in international collaborations.
Okay.
So the funded universities, they had a much bigger increase in doing research projects with people in other countries.
Oh, wow.
They made stronger connections with researchers and universities around the world.
So that seems like a really good thing, right? I mean, more international collaboration.
More perspectives, access to, a wider range of expertise, resources, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. And it wasn't just...
It wasn't just that.
Okay.
They also developed stronger connections with industry.
Okay.
So your sources, they talked about an increase in collaborations with businesses and other organizations.
So that probably had more real-world impact, right?
Yeah, it's more applied research.
Yeah.
Stuff that has more tangible benefits.
Some more patents being filed.
Right.
More startups.
And more innovation.
Coming out of universities.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a pretty big plus, even if it didn't, push them up the rankings as much as maybe they hoped.
So those international and industry links, they suggest that the funding did create a more outward-looking and maybe even more economically relevant research system.
Yeah.
But even with all that, as we talked about before, these universities, they didn't see these huge jumps in the ranking.
So with the more research being produced and these better global connections, it still wasn't enough to really reach those top spots. So.
So why do you think that is?
Yeah, what do the researchers think?
Yeah.
What were the obstacles?
So the study points to some deeper, more systemic issues within the universities themselves. Things like, excessive bureaucracy, a lack of flexibility in decision-making, maybe even, kind of entrenched, kind of inflexible academic cultures.
So those things, they're kind of holding them back, right?
Yeah, those structural elements, they made it harder for the university to really use the funding to make, big transformative changes.
Yeah. So it's not just about the money, is it?
It's not just about the money.
It's about how you can use that money.
Right.
If the structures are,
If the structures are rigid and bureaucratic, it doesn't matter how much money you have.
Yeah, totally.
It's not a guarantee of success.
Right.
This is really important.
Yeah,
I mean, it shows that just throwing money at a problem, even with the best intentions, it doesn't always work. Lasting change.
Yeah.
It usually requires addressing more fundamental structural and cultural issues.
Totally. So bringing this back to the listener, what's the big lesson here?
I mean, it's really insightful. It shows us how change happens in large, complicated organizations.
Right.
Not just in universities, but like in policymaking.
Totally. So the takeaway is more money doesn't always mean better results.
It's more complicated than that.
Yeah. So if we want to have...
If we want true scientific leadership, it's not just about money.
Right.
It's about creating an environment where high-quality research and innovation can really thrive.
So we need universities with more autonomy,
right?
Better management, a supportive culture.
Right. You need a culture that supports ambitious and groundbreaking work.
And then you need the money on top of that.
Exactly.
So it's like a big, complicated equation, right?
It's not a simple solution.
I hope this gives you, the listener, a better understanding of what's going on behind these rankings.
It's really complicated.
Yeah, and the things that universities and countries are trying to do to climb those rankings.
It's not easy.
No, and, it seems like if we want to achieve that, top-tier scientific success.
True scientific leadership.
Yeah, we can't just throw money at it.
It takes more than that.
We have to rethink.
Right.
And reshape.
We need to fundamentally change
the whole academic landscape,
the way we think about these things.
Well, thanks for sending over this stuff.
It was really interesting.
Yeah, this was a fascinating deep dive.
I enjoyed it.
Now that you've heard all of this, you know from our deep dive and from the stuff you read.
Yeah.
Here's something for you to think about.
Okay.
Could it be that all this focus on global rankings, could it be that that's actually distracting us from other things that are just as important for what makes a university really valuable to society?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something for you to think about.
Yeah, that's a good question.
On your own, yeah.
A lot to consider.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great having you.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.